when we first released our website for law schools, actually last year, one of our concerns was to have some useful, substantive content on the law school site, other than information about LEXIS and how to use the LEXIS research project. We had been contacted sometime before by Michael Geist with a proposition to look at something that he had developed and used in his teaching activities called the web lecture. And we took a look at it, and we were very, very impressed with what he had done, using it in his classroom work. And through a series of kind of negotiations and long discussions, what we came to agree upon was to commission him to prepare a variety of web lectures in substantive areas, torts, contracts, legal writing, intellectual property. There's a whole variety of them available on the law school website. I'll show you where those are and talk to you about where you can find them if you choose to use them as classroom assignments in the fall on our new website. The purpose of today's presentation is not to tell you what we have on the LEXIS website, but to let Michael talk to you about how he developed them, the theory behind them, and to explain to you how you might develop them yourselves on your own servers at your own school and customize the presentation information in the way that he has done if you think that it's a useful approach, and I think it will. So without taking much more away from it than that, I'd like to introduce Michael Geist, and we'll tell you all about web lectures.
Thanks, John. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Hopefully not going to get the same feedback on the mic that we had in the last presentation. Okay, the web lectures, what I'd like to do, we're going to cover a few things. And the presentation uses a web lecture, as you'll see in a moment. But before I begin, let me just ask, how many people have seen the web lectures either on the LEXIS site or some of my own stuff that's on my site? Okay, a couple of people. That's good. There's a lot of people that haven't, so this is a nice opportunity to get to introduce to you what I put together and some of the ways that you can use it. A few things that I wanted to cover today: talk about what the web lecture is, show you the kind of steps that have taken place over the last 2 years, although it feels like a lot more. Talk about some of the different ways that you can use the web lecture, and lastly, show you how easy it is to make a web lecture of your own. In fact, it's kind of embarrassingly easy. Sort of sometimes feel like, well, I've created something nice, but in reality, I didn't have any HTML background, and I still don't really have any HTML background. I use one of the typical software programs that people have been discussing throughout the conference. I used Claris Homepage. I heard yesterday people talking about Adobe PageMill, and I know Front Page. All of them will basically do just about the same thing, and they'll do it rather easily. Let me start with introducing what exactly a web lecture is, and this is essentially what a web lecture is. It's a framed presentation, and so up until more recently, when people have finally begun to get the hang of frames, it seems to me most people were just abusing frames terribly. It was an innovation that Netscape came up with several years ago, and all of a sudden you saw all sorts of websites using frames, and they just made navigation a significant problem and didn't really add anything to the site. But I think the web lecture actually makes a fairly good use of the frames, and people are starting to use it in ways similar to this, I suppose. And so web lecture is a frame presentation in which the top frame contains my own comments. It's my own document in the top frame, in this case often comments or analysis, and it depends on what I'd be using the web lecture for. If it was sort of a tutorial or a almost electronic type casebook, there might be some extensive comments, and we'll see some examples of how I use it in that sort of situation. When I use it more in a presentation sort of format, it's kind of just bulleted. It's just a couple pieces of information. What's interesting is the bottom frame. And the bottom frame you can link to or include any sort of site that you want. In this instance, it's including some of my own content again. So in fact, I created both the two pages, obviously just rather simple text pages. But most of the web lectures, and virtually all the web lectures, link out to another site. And so we don't store the site on the Columbia server for my own stuff or on the LEXIS server, but rather it's just a link. But rather than providing someone with a full series of links, which is often the approach, sort of here are all the interesting links that you might want to take a look at in constitutional law, this provides someone with a bit more context and analysis of what they'll be looking at, because you provide your comments in the top, and in the bottom, you link out to this bottom site, and it's there. What's nice about it is it's a live site, live link, as I'll show you in a moment. And so what you can do when you're navigating through the web lecture is link through this bottom frame, do whatever you'd like to do, explore it, link out to even other sites if it leads you that way. And when you're ready to continue, you can see that I've included icons. There's a front icon that will allow us to go forward to the next page of the web lecture, an icon that allows us to go back, and then a home link that allows us to go out to an index, which will include all the various pages in the particular web lecture or presentation. Okay, so navigating is fairly easy. There's the index. So all pages are live, so it's very easy to explore, and you can do whatever you like, continue on with the presentation, and then when you're ready, continue with the last thing. And what's nice about it, as opposed to some of the earlier iterations, everyone, of course, is now moving to the web. And this takes advantage of all the web, so it's anytime, it's anywhere, and it's any operating system. I'm still a Macintosh holdout, and so this was nice because anyone with a Mac can still make use of it, as can anybody with Windows or whatever they want, provided they have a browser. The other thing that's nice about it is that, particularly for students, as you'll see in a moment, is that students can take a look at your particular web lecture and come back to it any time, from anywhere, as long as they've got the web access from their home in the middle of the night. If this is something they want to go explore, they can do that. So you're not confined to your particular classroom time when you're creating the web lecture. The content that you might include in a web lecture page, and I'll show you some of the different examples as we go through, is limited by the web. And so in other words, it isn't really limited at all, because there's just any number of things that you can include. In the sorts of web lectures that I've tried to create, I've tried to find sites that include some sound, include some video, some of the sorts of things that we think of when we think, well, the web's a multimedia sort of tool, and let's take advantage of that and bring that into our teaching. I've provided links to show you 4 different sorts of content pieces. All of these link into different I'll put in a new window, into different web lectures that are on the Lexis site right now. You can see this is what the web lecture page looks like for the series of web lectures that John just mentioned. This comes from a contracts web lecture. You can see they've done a slightly jazzier web lecture icon than I was able to come up with. But it's the same sort of idea in terms of here's the web lectures, a previous and a next to navigate through. And as I'll tell you shortly, they're actually making some changes in some of the navigational tools, as some people made some suggestions of ways that you could improve what we had created. In any event, here's a contracts web lecture. You can see that I've tried to provide the student or the reader with a context as to what they're going to see and a sense of what's available on the site, and tie it into what they might be doing in contracts. And this links into the Center for Research on Contracts. This site here I chose just because it's got a huge contracts library. It requires a registration, but it's a free registration. And so I taught contracts several years ago and found that the one thing that was always missing was actually a contract. And so thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if students could actually take a look at the sorts of things that they're studying when they're talking about consideration and other sorts of issues. And so that's the site there. And then the lecture just continues on. We could continue to the next frame. And in this instance, it's some more sample contracts and agreements for students to take a look at. So that's, in some instances, the web lecture acts really just as a research tool. Here's some sort of content that we find out we can find. I've also tried to use sort of some real-life examples, rather than just simple case law and statutes, which is what often gets mentioned. Well, you can go out and grab cases on the web. Try to bring some real context to some of the things that are being created, that are out there on the web, that you wouldn't necessarily have enough. You wouldn't be able really to bring into a classroom, but you're able to do it when you involve the web. In this instance, it comes from the constitutional law web lecture, and let me just move this up a little bit so we can get a better sense. This is a great site, the Brown versus Board of Education museum website, and it provides all sorts of things for students that provides a context that they wouldn't normally have when they're studying the case. There is an electronic exhibit, all sorts of things dealing with issues, and there's all sorts of graphics and other sorts of explanations. There's a tour of Topeka that allows someone to go through and see the various sites and places that were occurring as part of the case. And so I think it does a fairly nice job of bringing the case to life in a way that you don't typically have when you're in a classroom. And there's all sorts of different ways of trying to find real-life examples of things. In civil procedure, I found when you're dealing with class actions, I found a bunch of websites that have actual class action sites, and they sort of provide a background and a history of what's taken place. They invite people to join in the class action, and it provides a real-life example for students of things that they wouldn't normally get straight out of a casebook. Due to the heart of people here at CALI, you can also try to use this as a tutorial, as in some instance, you'll find that there are actually some people have created tutorials on the web, and you can use the web lecture in that way. This comes from the property law web lecture. And again, so that you can get a sense. It's on your own computer screen, it's probably enough real estate, but here on the big screen, it's nicer to get a bit of space. Here, if we click, this comes from the University of Houston, and it's a whole thing. It's a whole tutorial on estates. And so you can see there's various. It looks like pretty straightforward. Here's the question, and we can take a guess, and if the guess is incorrect, it'll tell us the answer and scroll back. And so there are a series of these sorts of tutorials that are now online. It took some finding. If you go to find law, you're not going to find them, so to speak. You have to spend a fair amount of time trying to track these things down, but they're out there, and that's part of what I try to do with the whole series, is try to do a lot of that work for you. Here, present the various things for you and encourage you to use them. Then, of course, there are case law and statutes. Some instances linked directly here, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this site, which allows you to listen to the real audio version of a particular case. This comes from the criminal law web lecture dealing with the death penalty, Freeman versus Georgia case, and as many of you are probably familiar, it's got both the written opinions of the court as well as the ability to listen to oral arguments of the case. So there's all sorts of different things that you can link. You're only really limited to what you find available on the web. And if you want to take advantage of the stuff that I've put online and it's being hosted by Lexis, you'll find that it covers all these sorts of things. I've tried to get a piece of each, I would say, for each topic. Each topic, I should mention, runs about 25 to 40 pages, and so there's an opportunity to cover many of the topics that you would cover within a typical course, and cover all these different types of sites. All right. How did the web lecture develop? Well, it started 2 years ago, just less than 2 years ago, I suppose. I was teaching legal research and writing at Columbia University in New York, and was looking for a way to teach my students how to conduct legal research on the web. I was looking to do, I suppose, more than just that, though. Columbia had just installed some computer classrooms, and so one thing I wanted to do was take advantage of those computerized classrooms, so that rather than just talking about conducting legal research on the web, I wanted to be able to do it live so that everybody was in front of the terminal and can experiment with what they're doing. I also wanted it to be a living sort of document. It wasn't enough for me to say, all right, well, here's how you conduct legal research and writing on the web, or legal research on the web, go ahead and do it. I was more anxious to create a resource that students could come back to on a regular basis, and so that in subsequent courses and on down the line, this might be some place that they turn to as a way of, well, I want to find some stuff on the web. Geist put together this web lecture that covered some of the major sources and the ways that you would go about doing that. And so the web lecture, after a lot of experimenting, I must say, was born. I had a lot of difficulty, actually, getting it so that when you click to the next page, both pages would refresh themselves. That was by far the most difficult thing, because I just didn't know what I was doing. I started playing around with code, and just eventually it worked. And I don't know how it worked, actually, but it works. So, and I'll show you the code a little later on. This is a sample page from that web lecture. It was updated this past year because, of course, this stuff is changing all the time. And that's, I guess, raises an important point with regards to these sorts of web lectures. They're nice to create. You have to try to keep an eye on them if you're creating something that you hope people will use on a regular basis, because these sites die quickly. And so one of the things that we're struggling to do with the Lexis web lecture series is to ensure that the various sites stay up to date. Both new sites that come online that we want to include, but also sites that the links just seem to disappear. In any event, this was the typical web lecture, and it's pretty much as I described it. This is obviously the Find Law site, and it provides the students with a sense of, well, here's what they find in Find Law, a little bit of text, the same sort of icons that I just showed you before. As I indicated, this is a live site, so that you can explore and conduct research if you like. So law school admissions. Within FindLaw, you can do whatever you like. As you can see, the top page here, or the top page here, doesn't change. So it stays as it is, and when you're ready to continue with the web lecture, you just click on the icon, and there you go. And now I clicked on to the next site, in this case, the Legal Information Institute. And same sort of thing. Again, the icon's located at the bottom. It worked nicely in a classroom context, and so then I thought, well, why not try it out as a presentation tool? Again, there was some experimenting here. I tried presentation tool with all sorts of text and found that that was absolutely useless, and realized that what I was really trying to do was create a PowerPoint presentation that supplemented the web. And as long as I had a live link to the web, I could effectively put PowerPoint slides in the top frame, although in this case I don't use PowerPoint, I'm just using my basic HTML editor, but you could do that. And then in the bottom frame, trying to access a particular site. And I've used that now for several presentations, including last year's CALI presentation, in which I talked a bit about what people were doing on the web, and I used the web lecture as the format for doing that. One interesting byproduct that came out of that, I'm going to out to it because it was kind of cool, was CALI, I think in this instance, is actually recording this for real video. Last year they were just recording it in real audio, which for as many of you are probably familiar, you can use real audio to listen to various things on the web. Well, now on the web there is both the real audio version of my presentation from last year. There is also the actual web lecture materials, and they've stayed online. And there was a colleague that wasn't able to attend the presentation and was looking into some of these issues, what are faculty doing with the internet, and said, let me take a look at your presentation. And he was really actually able to experience the presentation, because he started up the real audio and was listening to me talk, and then at the same time was scrolling through the web lecture. And so it was really a kind of neat experience in terms of bringing the sound and the actual materials together in the same context using the internet, and it worked out really, really well. He was saying he heard enough of me in school. He didn't want me to really hear me that much on the internet as well, but he kind of enjoyed the opportunity to be there and not really be there. In any event, this actually I think is taken straight out of the CALI presentation last year. I was talking about some of the different simulations that are available on the web, and I felt and still feel this is probably the best one from Professor Lawless, and he does an M&A simulation in which the students are divided up into representing different corporations, I believe, and the documentation that's available at the site is amazing. For those that are looking to do it your own websites and do some really comprehensive sort of stuff, I encourage you to take a look, because it's fabulous. Okay, that's pretty much where we started with Columbia, with the work that I did for Columbia. As John indicated, eventually I hooked up with LEXIS and did a full series for them this past year. I also do for them a regular column on law and technology issues as they pertain primarily to legal education. And what we try to do with the column system, I might as well mention it while I'm here, is at the bottom there are a series of links related to whatever that I happen to be dealing with. And so we dealt this past year with things like the law school rankings issue, and put you out to different websites on the web that dealt with those sorts of issues. Some of the sites deal with legal resources that are available. Others often deal with some of the hot topic of the day, particularly as they impact people in legal education. In any event, here are the series of topics that we included, and so we focused in the first year on first-year topics. And so the 1997 series tried to cover just about everything that you might cover in a first-year curriculum, as well as intellectual property, which seemed like a natural for the web. And if we showed you property before, and this is the typical sort of thing. Sometimes it's commercial websites that firms have put their memos or other sort of information online. So it provides students with just a nice little background of what's available. In other instances, it's the sort of material that I was talking about earlier, the real audio versions, the multimedia projects. If you're dealing, constitutional law has some great stuff beyond just the Brown versus Board of Education, but there's all sorts of other things in terms of a banned book exhibit, all sorts of free speech type of things, as well as some of the real life sorts of stuff. You're dealing with libel. The McLibel case, with the McDonald's libel case from Britain, is a great resource to see a case in action in terms of seeing all the different things that was taking place at that time. For those that have seen this before and are interested in what's going to be taking place for this year, and certainly to encourage you to take a look and consider using some of this stuff, most of this stuff, or hopefully all of this stuff, will be available in August, and so in time for the coming school year. One thing we're doing is expanding the number of topics, adding as many as 8 new topics, cyberspace, so going beyond just the first-year courses in the intellectual property and adding a whole series of new topics. In this case, things like cyberspace law, labor law, tax law, biz law, human rights law, which is one that's just an enormous amount of information on the web, and it's really unnatural for this sort of approach, as well as environmental law, family law, and as well update all the various topics. And so most of the topics will have 20 to 30% new content in terms of removing some of the older stuff that is either kind of gone by the wayside or just isn't as interesting anymore, and try to pick up some of the new sites that are great, that have been created. There's just so much that's coming on year in, year out. The change is quite amazing. So we're trying to keep some of that stuff fresh. The other thing we're doing is changing some of the design in response really to the comments that people gave in terms of the limitations that they found with the version that you saw a moment ago. One of the major changes is going to be actually a third frame. So here I start talking about how people abuse frames and they're adding another frame. But in this case, I think it's actually going to make a very nice difference in terms of ease of navigation. It's just going to be one. Actually, it's not horizontal, it's vertical. It's one vertical frame on the left side that will allow the user to easily jump between any of the various topics. So the library is getting fairly large, and so by August we're going to be looking at 15 or 16 web lectures, so that it's now going to be, at least in my vision, a fairly comprehensive look at some of the primary legal materials that are appropriate, particularly at the legal education level. So rather than just providing you with your 1,000 legal links, it's sort of highlighting some of the very best in these various topics. To make it easier to get around, all the various topics will be on this third frame so that you can easily jump as between each of them. Another thing that we're doing, and it's something that was missing this past year, is adding an index page. I mentioned that in my own materials. I had put an index page, and I showed you the one for this particular presentation. The LEXIS web lectures didn't have that. And so some people indicated that it made it rather difficult if you knew that the page that you wanted to take a look at was sort of the 23rd or the 30th topic, and you literally had to scroll through all of them to get there. You're not going to have to do that anymore. And so now there'll be an index page that I believe will lead off. The very first page will be an index of all the various sites. And so that each individual page will stand a bit more standalone, and it'll be quite simple to jump to a particular page if that's the one that interests you and you want to revisit it. We're also moving towards a simpler navigational system that will be consistent throughout, so that rather than the icon and the different frames that you saw there, it'll be just a little bit simpler in terms of the sorts of things that you see. There's also going to be a web lecture center. You saw what the page looked like this past year, where it was sort of sharing space with the column. Now it's going to become its own sort of center. And for each page, in that page, there will be an abstract for each of the various web lectures. So if you want to get a sense of what you're going to find, you say, well, listen, I don't really have time to scroll through everything. Just give me a sense of a feel of what I'll find there, so be able to explore it on that basis. Finally, and this is one that a lot of people mentioned, the various URLs for the link to sites are going to be listed as well. Recognize that was one of the difficulties. There were ways to get a hold of the link to URL. You could view the source, or you could view the bottom page in a new frame. But a lot of people felt, well, that's too much work. And some people indicated they weren't even aware that you could do those sorts of things. And so to make things easier, what you'll find now is in the top frame up here, I believe that they'll be at the bottom. I believe if you scroll down towards the bottom here, you're going to find that the actual URL for whatever the link to site will be included, which will make it a lot easier if that's something you want to bookmark or include. It's a sense of some of the changes that are going to take place. Okay, how have I incorporated the web lectures, or how might you incorporate it into the web lectures? In many different ways. Obviously, as a research tool or as a reference guide, this is a link to my legal research and writing homepage that I designed for my students, and just an indication that it's something that you could use the LEXIS web lectures that I've created, or create your own and use it as part of your teaching. You might also just enhance your own website or enhance some electronic course materials. There was an interesting article recently in the Jurist site talking about how electronic casebooks have a tremendous amount of potential, but one of the things that are missing from them is an incorporation of all the different things that the web has to offer. They're often lacking some of the various links that are out there. One of the things that you might consider doing is linking in to these various materials. And you can see this is Nick Terry's Torts page, and so one of the things that he's done is provide a link to the web lectures and say, listen, there's a Torts web lecture on topic. This is something that you might want to consider exploring. I should also add that this is certainly, and hopefully it's fairly apparent, certainly isn't limited to if you're teaching in the context of legal research and writing or a substantive topic. Training, if you're involved with MIS or in the library, and what you're really interested in is providing someone with training tools, this is an ideal sort of framework for providing people with those tools. So that if you want to show them how you use Netscape Navigator, you can almost create your own guide to Navigator or your own guide to whatever sort of thing you're trying to do by, again, providing the instructions and some of the guidance in the top frame, and in the bottom frame providing a link or something on the outside. So you're certainly not limited to some of the substantive topics that I've been referring to. Finally, if I haven't yet come to a particular topic that you think should be on the web lecture series, certainly tell me, but beyond that, feel free to create your own, especially if you find that there's some sites that aren't there, or you're perhaps interested in creating a small module within a course and you want to do something along those lines, or even a presentation. Some people have done exactly that. This is a site from Auburn University, Montgomery, and you can see that I picked it up, and he has put together exactly what I'm referring to. This was actually a presentation that was made within the school, trying to sell people on the use of the internet within the school, why the particular program should be increasing its use both within class and out of class, and it adopted the same approach. I mean, I think he referenced me at the beginning. This is where he first saw the idea, and so it's the same sort of thing. The icons move back and forth, and so if you're interested, it's fairly easy to create. Okay. Now, the question is, how can you create your own web lectures? And I should note that you don't have to bother copying all this stuff down. You can always just, these materials are up on the web, and the URL is here, and I'll leave it up on the Columbia server indefinitely if you want to check it out that way. But it's really 3 steps. The first step, I think, is to create a sort of the template that works for you. And part of the decision-making process is how large do you want the top frame, how large do you want the bottom frame. And you'll find that you start running out of real estate rather quickly. And so it's something that it can be rather difficult. It works better, I think, in many instances when you're sitting there on your own computer. Then you have enough space. But certainly sometimes you'll find you go to a link to site and they've got this huge banner across the top, and that's basically all you're seeing, and you have to scroll down to see anything more. So that's a consideration. This is all the coding that is essentially existing on this particular page, through all the substantive coding. And all you're really doing, 3 things. You're specifying how large the 2 frames are going to be. So here this is indicating 38% of the page is the top frame, 62% is the bottom frame. And then you're just indicating which document is going to appear in the top frame and which document is going to appear in the bottom frame. And so the top frame is probably going to be a document that you yourself are going to create. So it's going to have the various discussion or analysis, or even just little quick pointers that you have, and that's going to be an additional document that you're going to create, and you're going to link to on that top frame. And the bottom frame is just the bottom frame site. So whatever site that happens to be, that's what it'll look like. We can just to prove to you that is in fact. Let's see where the page source is. So there's the page source. And so as I indicated, so this is actually the page that we were just looking at. And so as you can see, it was created with Claire's homepage. So I didn't do any of this coding myself. Some of the stuff at the beginning is just some of the basic stuff in terms of the title of the page and things of that nature. The substantive thing that you're looking at is this exact here. And so I've created 2 documents because in this instance I wasn't linking out to another site. I was just linking out to my own document. And so it's called 98 CALI 10A, which was the top frame, and 98 CALI 10B. So pretty simple, actually. So that's step 1. And what I do to make it easy on myself and to have a consistency of look is to just reuse the same template over and over. And so just to save as another document and save as another document. That way the frame will always appear at the same place. It makes it a little bit easier. Step 2 is really to create the top frame page. So to create the top frame that I said is going to appear there. So that's your own commentary and discussion. Okay. The other thing that you're going to want to include are the icons. So these icons here, you don't necessarily have to include the index. You saw that in the example of Professor at Auburn that didn't bother including an index page. He was just using arrows going back and forth. But you can choose to do that or not. In any event, you just want to make all these hot so that they're continuing to link. A look at what that looks like. Let me indicate a couple of the main things. I mentioned earlier on that the difficulty that I encountered was how, when I click on that arrow, do all the pages refresh themselves to 2 new documents. And I know that there's actually probably something better that you can do, but all I did was base target is equal to any HTML. And I guess what happens is any HTML isn't a document. It's just nothing. And so what happens when the browser sees that, it just opens up new frames on both pages. There's probably a proper HTML coding that you do for that, but in any event, that works if you want to use it. So when you use that, the browser sees that and actually does exactly what you've been seeing. Both the top frame page and the bottom frame page create themselves. And you can see the rest of it. In this instance, this is all just sort of specifying different fonts, but this is looking at essentially what we were looking at before, and it's just text. In terms of this sort of top text, might as well view page source again. So this is the page source for that top frame, and as you can see, the base target is the any.html, and the rest of it is just specifying the various fonts, and there's the text that you saw. So it's the various text, how to create your own web lecture part 2, and there's step 2. Be sure to link the icons to a new browser window, which involves using the base target. And then this mixes is the 3 icons. So it's specifying where each of the icons are going to link to. And that's pretty much it. But as I say, you don't really have to know really any of this. All you really have to do is know how to create a frame, and creating a frame in just about any of those various programs, be it page mill or home page or front page, is pretty straightforward. Then finally, the last step is just uploading it to the server. I mean, it's done. They're pretty simple pages, but they can also be quite effective. If you have any questions as you're moving along, and if you're trying to create your own or you have ideas or things of that nature, please feel free to email me. As I indicated, I'll leave this up on the site, so if you're looking to actually take a look at the code or you want links into some of the other sorts of things, by all means, please use it. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
There are old products out there, web-based bots, which are CALI. So, have you any experience with those, and how do they compare to the designs that you're doing yourself?
No, I've been a do-it-yourselfer for the last couple of years, and so I haven't tried any of the web page in a box, or either the Twin or the Lexis product. I don't know that any of those products have a built-in feature that specifically say, okay, you can create this web lecture page. I suspect they don't. I mean, they might have other things that work nicely. What I found that most people tend to use in using those sorts of things are often just the series of links that I mentioned. It's almost often they'll say, all right, well, you can create for someone the whole series of links if that's what you'd like to do. But I think this takes it a step further, which is why I sort of created it on my own. One of the nice things about if you've done a do-it-yourself, or I believe if you use either, I know certainly the virtual classroom, but I believe Twine as well, you can link out into this material if you like, and so you can make use of some of those products if you don't want to create your own web page, but at the same time take advantage of the stuff that's already online by just providing a direct link into it. Yeah.
Can you put in a link that will retrieve the case?
Not yet, I don't think. Okay, John's going to address that.
I'll be speaking for a few minutes from Michael's son, and I'll answer your question then. It'll be something I'm not covering.
Okay, very good. Anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to thank you your legal research with a narrow model at the University of San Diego, and I just wanted to say, not in here, I'm sure we're not the only ones when we decided to use cases and advanced legal research. And I worked with someone who was working on the technical end, and she said, well, give me an idea what you want. What I did was print off your page, and she went off and basically did that and came up with a wonderful time. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to acknowledge.
Oh, thanks very much. Any more questions like that? Yeah.
Another question. You mentioned all these authoring tools. If you wanted to, for proprietary problems, I was just using front page for a while, and it would work great if your browser was Internet Explorer, but it was Netscape, a lot of features would show up. Have you run into those kind of problems too?
No, not at all. Claire's homepage is available both on both. There's a Windows 95 version and a Mac version, but that sounds strange to me just because, I mean, they're supposed to be spitting out code that any browser is going to look at.
The reason I mentioned is that our IT department has moved us towards Netscape and Composer as the authoring tool, because apparently some open architecture will work with any browser. And some of the other authoring tools are more proprietary, like Microsoft are dominating the world. So, if you make something with front page, then all its bells and whistles will only show up on Internet Explorer.
Yeah. That I've never heard that complaint before.
That's sort of specific to front page and more than when you get more generic with site management. You have to use their site or stuff from scratch.
Right. I mean, the first page is using front page and there was a web box in there, but they didn't work properly.
Who's thinking about front page?
There we go. Anyone else? Yeah.
The visually impaired know that there are previews, know to go through previews.
It's a good question. I got, to be honest, offhand, I don't know an answer. I mean, I don't. If they're typically looking at the browser and they're using some sort of voice recognition, they can probably. I would suspect they'd be able to do that. Although it's probably not built in well enough for that. You're right. That's a problem. It's something I hadn't taken into account. In part because it was I was designing this for my own students and didn't have that issue when I was first dealing. There were no students of mine at that point in time that had that problem, but it's something that we should consider. Thanks. Well, thanks very much.
To pick up on a couple of the questions that were addressed to Michael, a couple of additional comments before we show you a couple of other things and then close for the hour. We've experimented with a variety of different authoring tools because of the problem that you brought up, because we have to make sure that whatever we put up pretty much works across the board, no matter whether the user's using a PC or Macintosh, Internet Explorer, or Netscape. And we've come to some conclusions. How many people have heard of the Opera browser? Okay, it's not free. I believe it's $49 to register it, but it is a wonderful proofing tool for your work because it's kind of plain vanilla. And if something's going to break, it'll break under that browser. The authoring tools that we've experimented with include Front Page and Hot Metal Pro. I don't know if any of you have looked at that. Hot Metal Pro has a wonderful kind of uniform set of checking tools in it to make sure that you're following standard code. You kind of run a little error report on it, and you can set the code level, whether you want it to check for HTML2 or HTML 3.2, and for working with specific browsers. And it's a good clean vanilla authoring tool to write in. And Claire's homepage also works wonderfully, and a lot of people have had good luck with PageMill. But Front Page does produce some proprietary code which works well or only at all in Internet Explorer. So you might want to consider that when you start building something like this. With respect to the question on vision impaired users, I think the dispositive issue is, are they using a browser which is frames capable? If they're using links or something like that, I don't think they're going to be able to navigate this kind of an interface. So the solution is to have an alternate path, if you will, that resides on the no-frame side, so that when the browser hits it, they can move off on that path, not necessarily navigate frames, but they'll have navigation forks or choices to make. And that's a responsibility of the author who's building the site to take that into account. And it really means building two sites, building one no-frame site and one frame site. But that seems to be probably the best solution for vision-impaired users, at least the one that I've come across. I only want to talk about just a couple things in closing here. One is to show you where the web lectures are on the Lexis for All Schools site now, and then tell you where you're going to be able to find them after August 1st, because this site is going to change. And I'm going to explain this by way of a little bit of anecdotal information, because working with Michael in the web lectures taught us a couple of bitter lessons last August when we were involved in our site design. For those of you who visited the Lexis for All Schools site last August, what you discovered is that to get in to really look at any of the content, you had to log into the site and register and get a little ID and try to navigate. Well, that worked really well sometimes. But the big problem was we found out there was a tremendous international attraction to the web lecture content. And people from all different countries wanted to look at it. And in the typical ethnocentric fashion, we had only had down there to register for U.S. law schools. And Michael received a huge pile of email from all over the world saying, you get these great web lectures on the Lexis Law School site, and we can't get into them. So based on that, and then some other feedback, we took a look at our site, and we completely eliminated the registration aspect to get into the site. And that's part of what we're trying to do in terms of having a law school website that's open to the world and is moving along with the web and technology and kind of an open architecture model, rather than a closed architecture model. For some reason, this is dropping out, I'm sorry. A closed architecture model in which you have to be a Lexis subscriber in order to get in and look at the material. And we're going to take that one step further in the fall. We move from clicking on one of these choices here and having to register to just clicking on the choice and being able to go in and have the view. This is all going to go away on the left-hand side. This is our website. This is Lexis Research. This is always going to be free, and you can bounce around here and do whatever you want. You're always going to need a Lexis ID to get into Lexis Research. But on this side, in the fall, you're going to see push-forward content. There's actually content on the front page rather than just a memoing option. And one of the things you're going to see there appearing regularly will be Michael's column and an opportunity to get into that. The web lectures currently are available to anyone who wants to visit them by clicking on one of the views, and then in the left-hand column menu, choosing web lectures, and that gets you to a page which has the current column, an archive of previous columns so you can read the one from the previous week, and then the web lectures themselves. And the new site, you'll find across the top a series of navigation tools, and web lectures will just be listed there prominently, and you can go directly to them. Another thing that we've learned is that faculty members want to be able to bookmark and go to particular web lectures immediately without having to navigate the Lexis site. It makes it easier to assign for your students, and one of the things you may have noticed or not when we run to the web lectures is that there's no commercial activity going on in there. They're academic in nature. On the site there will be a Lexis navigation bar at the very top so that you can move around. But when you get into the web lectures, you're not going to find ads for our products or anybody else's, just the information that's contained on the topic. So we're redesigning the site as part of the web lecture activity so that the URL that will appear here will be one that is bookmarkable, and it will take you directly to the page. You notice when I navigated here, the URL didn't change. This is difficult to navigate because we have some things going on here with frames. We're changing that so that you can go directly to web lecture as a classroom assignment without, again, having to be concerned with navigating the LEXIS site. And the last thing I wanted to show you, and I would like to ask for your feedback, is something that we have in beta. And the topic for today's presentation was how to add Xchange content to your virtual classroom and information about the web lecture. So this is the first topic, if you will. And how many people here have attended a virtual classroom demonstration or presentation sometime through here? Okay, most of you are familiar with it then. This is the company based at Virginia Commonwealth University site that we contract with to provide that technology. And I'm going into a beta area there. Okay, this is the starting page in order to build a virtual classroom, and I built a sample course this morning in about 15 minutes. And I populated just a little bit of content for those of you who haven't seen what it looks like. We've got some class info that the instructor put in, and I grabbed this site off Cornell show that you can link to outside sites. And this might be where you would have a link to one of the web lectures if you built your virtual classroom. And I'm backing up again to the home page. In the class info page, there was information about what the course text was, but as sometimes happened, it didn't arrive at the bookstore, so the instructor put up an announcement that you'd go down and get this Getting DS book for this negotiations class at a local bookstore. Class schedule, fairly easy to navigate. And again, it took about 15 to 20 minutes to build this particular class this morning. A student list, and I hand-populated these with 6 fake students, as you can tell. And then finally, the learning links page where the content is. And in this particular class, we created a discussion group, which is open to anyone, and a welcome message from the instructor. And you begin to see here that the class is divided into 2 groups, a plaintiff group and a defendant discussion group, and that there's a settlement conference problem. So one of the options that the instructor took advantage of was to create a smaller subset discussion group for the defendant group students and the plaintiff group students, and restricted on this side just to the instructor and these students, and instructor and these other students for the other group. And then as the instructor fleshed out the class, would have various lessons and bits of information, but also an automatic building of links into LEXIS inside the virtual classroom, so that when you click on it, all that's needed is to log in. Oops, doing typos on that, excuse me. We're going to LEXIS and display the class in the virtual classroom. Now, we had a question a little earlier, can you build links into LEXIS, into a web lecture? The answer is yes, and if you'll send me an email at leoweb, L-E-O-W-E-B, it's not a person's name, it stands for Legal Education Organization Web, at LEXIS-NEXIS.com. We will email you the linking information. When you build a link onto any web page for material on LEXIS, the user has to have a LEXIS ID. Now, the information we'll send you will give you an URL and for 4 different ones. One's for LEXI, one for LEXDAT, one for Shepherds, and one for AutoSite. And we'll look at that sample URL and the samples that we send you, and to see what the site is, and you simply take that site out, put in the one you want, and use that URL, and it will work for you. And we've made that information available to people who currently use a virtual classroom, but we're working on building a couple of automated tools. Do we have any twin users here? Okay. For the twin users, they can tell you that if you have some material and you put little bracket signals around it and then you promote it up through twin, that can become a hot link to a case or document in Westlaw. We will have that plus a forms-based site link building tool, and that's what I'd like to show you now. Okay. We're going to create a brand new course. Well, actually, we'll use the sample course. I don't need to do that. Okay. We'll go into the sample course. And in about 3 or 4 weeks from now, when you use the virtual classroom authoring tool, you'll see the opportunity to add LEXIS links. And you'll be able to add them just on the Learning Links page itself or inside any particular lesson. And in an earlier session, we had a request to also add the ability to put LEXIS links in the syllabus part of the virtual classroom so that you can have links to the cases you want students to read on the page that you're actually giving the assignment. And it's pretty straightforward. This is the link that's already there, the one that you saw that we clicked on. And I asked for 3 links, so it's giving me 2 more blank spaces. And you choose which of the LEXIS services you want to use, LEXI, LEXDAT, Shepherds, or AutoSite. We'll go ahead and go with LEXI. And put in the citation you want. So one of my favorite cases, there's actually 2 cases on that page because the cases were really short back in the old days. And okay, and what you type in the title will be what actually shows up as the link on the page. And then you might want to add some comments. We've seen my typing skills, so we'll just go with that. And if you leave the last form blank, it simply won't build a link on that. And you can add as many of these as you want incrementally. And you simply click on Submit, and it builds a link for you. So we'll go back up and take a look at that class where I had the Sony Corp link. And I'll open up the Learning Links. Okay, and we scroll down, and we don't see the link. And that's because, of course, the page has been loaded from the cache, so we're looking at the old link. So as you're testing this and building on it, you want to click Reload, and there's the link that we just built. And then it goes and retrieves it. So this is how we propose to bring linking technology to you, and I suspect that maybe 90 days after we have this out with the virtual classroom, something very similar to this should be available as a tool for you to use to populate links in things like web lectures and other documents that you do on the web. And those are the features that I wanted to show you this morning. And what I'd really like to do right now is thank Michael for coming up with the concept of web lectures and the tremendous work he's done for us. We've received a great deal of interest because of it, and I think it's been a valuable contribution to the academic community. So, Michael, thank you. And I'm open for questions. Yes? LEXDAT is in there. You can link to anything that's retrievable on LEXIS with a LEXI or LEXDAT command, which is essentially most documents materials. Yes. Okay. As long as the user's ID gives them access to that source. So if you want to link to Nexus materials, there's no problem with the law school ID. But if you put a page up that's publicly available, and let's say you have a sole practitioner in town who, or somebody with a small law firm that's subscribing to the Lexis Advantage subscription. It's the low-cost $50 a month all-you-can-eat narrow slice for small law firms and practitioners. They probably don't have access to Nexis. So what would happen is they would click on that link and they would put in their ID and they would get a message that it's not available under the base subscription. They'd have the opportunity to look at it if they wanted to pay for it. But in the academic environment, almost everything that's available in Lexis is available on academic subscription, so you can link to just about anything. If your ID will link to it, your students' IDs will. Okay, anything else? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
This one right here?
So it doesn't, I missed the point of the link of there having to have a Lexis ID. Where was that entered?
So, I had logged in once before, so once you sign in and execute the first link, you don't have to keep signing in. You can just keep working the links. Okay.
Did that sign you out as before?
No, and that's one of the differences between web technology and the session manager technology, dedicated Lexis software. With Lexis software, even if you're using a TCP/IP connection, you're calling up Lexis and establishing a permanent link to us until you sign off. When you're using web browser access, you only talk to us when you hit the return key. And then you're just out there in etherland, etherspace, if you will, until you hit the return key again. So there is no automatic log off. It will stay live until you close your browser, and that's the way you sign off from Lexis in the web browser world, is closing your Netscape session. And we know you're there because a temporary cookie is dropped down from Lexis, and it's what's called a session cookie. And when you close your browser, that cookie goes away. It doesn't exist. It doesn't reside on your machine.
Where do you know the crashing?
I'm sorry?
Where do your browser crashing?
Oh, you have to relog back in.
Okay, Lexis?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, with a single ID, because it's not a constant connection, you could open two browser windows and have simultaneous Lexis research sessions on the web and look at two different documents and toggle back and forth between them if you wanted to. On the other hand, if you use your browser correctly, you could simply retrieve two different documents and use the backward and forwards key on the browser to toggle back and forth between them that way, but it wouldn't allow you to show them side by side. Okay, well, thank you all very much.
The other thing is if you go to the Wall Street website and click on one last thing I mentioned is I think we need well, because it sounds it was just because when you're on mass, when you log into Clang, you log into level. You can't log in with that in common. You of course know that you can't be doing cases on the same